So Miss Star Darwin is standing in for her mother, Carol Whitehawk, and she may be able to join us because she had something going on that she needed to take care of. So I don't know a lot about Miss Darwin, and she can let us know who she is, what she does, what her dreams are, what her struggles are. And now I will give the platform to Ms. Soft Karibu. Karibu means welcome in Swahili, and thank you.
Well, my name is Star Downwind. I'm an enroll member in the Red Lake Ojibwe Nation Reservation. I currently work for Unda Young as a safe harbor case manager. So I work with youth who are being sex trafficked or at risk of being sex trafficked. Excuse me. I grew up with my mom always doing the same type of work. I'm a sexual assault advocate. So I grew up like in the trainings and helping my mom with her work. And so it kind of came natural that I'm doing the same thing. I'm not sure.
It's 600 feet. Merge onto
I'm not sure what else you would like to know, but I'm open to if you have any questions or.
I didn't catch where you work. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I work at Unda Young. I'm a case manager for Safe Harbor. So I work with the I work for the youth that are being sex trafficked.
Got it.
So what has been your experience as far as a Native young American woman? What has been your experience with racism and living outside of the reservation? Has that been any different situation?
Like just my experience in general as a person.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing I do know that.
Continue on I-94 west for 2
sorry,
miles.
my daughter's. But I know that the legal system personally for us is unjust. When I was 15 years old, I was sexually assaulted, and I had everything you could do to convict a man for sexual assault. Like I had the physical evidence. I had I had the physical evidence. I had witnesses. I had everything in textbook that you would need to press charges and take it to court. And when I was in the hospital, I was drinking. So when I went in, the doctors and the nurses didn't take what I was telling them as far as like being assaulted. They just thought they were treating me as a drunk person. And eventually my mom had to come in and demand that they help me with the assault. And so they did a rape kit. The police came to talk to me, and they nothing happened. They said that they were investigating these men for like drug charges, and my rape charge would interfere with that. And so then you go down maybe 10 years down the road. My brother, he had some legal problems in the past, but nothing on the nature of what I'm gonna share with you. But the police came to find him at my house, and they were going to arrest him for a sexual assault charge. I remember being a victim myself, kind of questioning it myself, and I went to court with every single court date he had. The woman that said that he raped her was I don't know how to say it, like a white person or a white female. And I went to every court date with him. There was no evidence, no physical evidence. There was no witnesses. Her story changed 4 different times, and they convicted my brother. And what? Oh man, you're editing the wrong. But they. I'm sorry, I'm really out going all over here right now. But they convicted my brother with that. So what did that tell me? As being a Native female, when I was assaulted, I had everything to convict these men, and they didn't do anything. They treated me like I was a drunk Native woman. And when my brother was accused of it, and literally they had no leg to stand on, my brother went to prison for that. And it affects his life every day. Every day. Like even our sibling, we got custody of our younger siblings, and he can't be around them because of what he was charged with. And that's just one example of many. Growing up, I'm sorry, I'm just all over the place because I'm in the middle of driving or getting to where I need to be. But that was my biggest one that I think affected my life the most. It's harder for us to find housing, especially with the last name like Downwind. A lot of us have, like my mom, she's a White Hawk. I know people with, stands with the fist, or just different last names that as soon as people see that last name, they don't like to rent to us. I know with my brother, they're easier to think that we're, did the crime. They charge us more, just like African Americans. We could do the same crime as a white person, and they'll get 2 months probation, where we'll get 5 years in prison.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Bruce Moreland has his hand up.
All right.
Yes, I appreciate your sharing that story. It's a hard one to hear. I kind of have one question about how you feel about something, and then I have another fact question I'd be curious to know the answer to. So let me just start with the how you feel about, given your experience and given then your brother's experience, how do you feel in general about the whole Me Too movement, which really hits that right in the face of accuser and accused?
I feel really strongly about it. I mean, I was a part. I did the whole Me Too part. I'm trying to think of how I can describe it. I mean, what happened to me is a huge part of what I do.
Right.
One of the things was that the men that assaulted me, I later had found out that because they were involved in drugs, they were trying to traffic me. So the fact that I work with the youth to prevent this or help them get, to safe places and heal from their own traumas is very connected to what happened to me.
Okay. And then my follow-up question is kind of when I listen to NPR, I hear lots of activists talking about the reservations and the whole relationship between the reservation and the federal government. And I've often wondered if it almost sounds like there's a split personality on who's really in charge, what the jurisdiction is that plays. Is that a problem in some sense? Because there's always this who's in charge here whenever a crime is being investigated?
As far as from on the res and off the res,
Yeah.
very So, I mean, I do know that there's tribes that now, because there was a bill that was passed that was where we're able now, like I think it was back in like 2015, that we're able to charge men that come onto the reservation, because we couldn't do that before. And that was why we were like targeted, because it was like they could go onto the reservation and they could rape a Native American woman, and we didn't have a court system or any way of trying to, to get justice for these women that were being assaulted. And then the regular state government couldn't step in because it happened on a reservation. So I think back in 2015, there was something that a bill that was passed that gave us the ability to prosecute these men. Where the problem is now, though, is that there are some reservations that are so poor that we don't have a way to make a courthouse. We don't have enough money to have a jail. So I think that's kind of what we're facing now since this passed. I know I went to a conference back in 2015 that was regarding how we were going to go about as far as the reservations that couldn't have their own court and didn't have their own jail. And I don't know what is coming with that. But as far as I know, we're trying to figure out the kind of the gray areas that, fall through the cracks kind of thing.
Thank you.
Maybe I can add some legal background here, since I've dealt with this, if you don't mind, Star. The Red Lake Indian Reservation is the only reservation in Minnesota that the state does not have jurisdiction over. And some other reservations like White Earth, Leech Lake, whites and non-natives will own land interspersed with American Indians that own land. But on Red Lake, all the land belongs to the reservation. And so it's what's called a closed reservation, which means if a crime occurs there, even though it's in Beltrami and Clearwater County, Beltrami and Clearwater County law enforcement and prosecutors have no authority. Minor crimes are prosecuted by the local tribal courts, but there's a law called the 30 major crimes, and those are prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney. And I don't know about the change in 2015, but it used to be that the local tribal courts only had jurisdiction over members of the Red Lake Band. So if a non-member was on the reservation, committed a crime, they didn't have authority to prosecute that, but then the county didn't have authority. And if it wasn't one of the 30 federal crimes that the U.S. Attorney can prosecute, it was kind of a gray area. It sounds like they finally fixed that. Anyway, that's a little bit about Red Lake. The other reservations, I mean, I assume you don't want to lecture on the Indian law in this area, but the other reservations, there's mixed authority. And so, for example, Mille Lacs has its own police department, its own court system, but also the county sheriff's office has jurisdiction on the reservation, and the county attorney can prosecute crimes. And it's kind of more than we want to spend time on here, I'm sure, to decide who does what. I don't know if that helps or not. And is that your understanding, Star? Have I said anything different?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. I mean, it really, they have to pinpoint, say it was on an open reservation and not Red Lake. Yeah. They would have to, see that, the address of where the assault occurred to be able to know who had it. And what the problem was is when it was on the reservation land and it was not a member, then it was I think really could happen. Because it was, unless it was, murder, huge drug charges, then it would be federal. But so I think I wish that I knew the name of what I'm talking about, because I remember going to a meeting about this, like a training in California about how we were going to go about this big change that was happening, that where we could prosecute these non-members for, you know, coming in and doing crimes on the reservation.
So I have could you please tell us what your vision for yourself and your community is? What do you want to see happen for you and for your community, and how can we help you with that? What's your dreams for yourself? What's your dreams for your community?
One of them I know for sure is education in schools. A lot of people still are very naive about the history of America when it comes to us. You know, like a lot of what, I mean, I remember in school only hearing about, you know, like maybe there was a chapter in our history book that like touched on the history of Native Americans. And honestly, and to hear more in depth of the history of it, because a lot of people don't even know the wars that happened on the land that we're standing on. You know, like here in Minneapolis, or, you know, like at Fort Snelling, and, you know, there's just so much of our history that isn't taught in school, that I think that's the start, like that's the seed of it, is kind of the education piece of like what our history is and what we went through, because a lot of people don't know. So that's a big dream, I know. And the other one too is just as far as like, you know, the equality, like the justice system, of like kind of the example of what I was saying, you know, like where, you know, our women get assaulted and they're treated like drunk Indians, or our men get accused of something and it's not even fairly prosecuted, or he wasn't given a fair trial. And that's only one story, you know. I know so many women that don't report, so many Indigenous Native women that don't report crimes that are done to them because nothing happens. So that's my dream, is to kind of get the Justice Department more, I don't know, get more justice for us, you know.
Is there a difference in the way things are prosecuted if it's done on the reservation versus in the, for lack of a better term, the white man's court?
I haven't lived in Red Lake since I was a little girl. I think it's different. Just as far as like, say, I'll just give you the example of Red Lake. We have our own court and our own jail. And we're the only ones there, you know, so it's like, if you go in and you did a robbery and your neighbor did a robbery, you guys are going to probably get the same, you know, sentence. You're going to get charged the same, you're going to get the same sentence. Where if you come down here, somebody, you know, stole a backpack or did some type of crime, that it would be fairly, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. And I'm not talking the way I wanted to, but okay, thank you. But no, I think it's not fair. Where it needs to work is what he said, like the white man's court system.
Instead of that, let's just say off reservation court.
Off reservation, yes.
My fault. I should have said that better.
It's okay.
You're doing great for such a short notice. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions?
Star, this is Ted Johnson. Can you say any more about sort of the work that you're doing now? And do you do you see any changes ahead, or anything that might be developing because of some of the situations that are and concerns now about race by so many people, or not?
Like tying in the race part of the work that I do, if I'm
Yes.
seeing like good changes with things. There's I know they changed the safe harbor age, because for a long time it went up to 18, and it was really hard because a lot of these women would, young girls would, need help, and we couldn't help them if they were 19 or if they were like just 20. So they did change that to 21, which was a big barrier for us. I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think of how I can answer this question. I see progress, and I see places that need, because that was the biggest one, and I was really, really happy when they changed the age to 21. And because these women were getting prosecuted for being sex trafficked, and so that helps hugely when, a woman who's in her 20s that got kidnapped when she was, 10 isn't being charged for being for something that happened to her. So yeah. I do big changes in the work that I do in a good way, but it's kind of it's a battle, I think, that is going to be ongoing for a while.
So what do you want to do for your education? So where do you go next as far as your schooling?
Oh, as far as education?
Yes, so yeah.
Well, I'll kind of, I guess this is more my background, really. When my mom wanted me to talk about it, I guess. I was a teen mother. When I was younger, because of the traumas that I faced, I got into abusing alcohol and ended up being a teen mom. But I changed my ways when I had my daughter, and then I had my son in my early 20s, and there was no help as far as childcare went, or I didn't receive any type of financial help from their dad. So I worked up to the position that I am solely on work experience. I got my GED, and that's kind of as far as I went. Before COVID happened, I had signed up to take classes to just do my generals. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I know that helping women is kind of my, especially in the sexual assault advocacy part of like the movement for women. And so I kind of was making my first step, and then COVID happened. And so we'll kind of see where it goes from there.
What do you think the community needs specifically as Native Americans that people sitting here listening to you, what would you suggest for us to do to support the Native American community?
Communities. Funding our programs is a huge, I mean, we suffer from so many different issues. The homelessness is a huge part, like housing, finding affordable housing for us. we have really good programs, but the funding part is the part that makes it things more difficult for even like as far as me in the work that I do, because there's sometimes where we have to financially take out of our own pockets to do things for our clients and different things. So I think as far as like helping us, that would be a really good first step, would be just kind of looking at what programs we have. Like I know we have housing programs, we have organization for women, Native women who are sexually assaulted, Native women who are in domestic violence situations, with our treatment centers. So that's a huge issue, is like the being able to fund the programs that help our people in, especially in, you know, the urban areas where our reservations really can't do much, you know. So I think that's a big start. Did that answer your question?
Yes, Ms. Starr, thank you.
You're
Anyone else?
welcome.
Mhm.
Star, do you have do you have lists of organizations or something that could be provided to us? We have Rotary clubs and Rotarians from a lot of different areas around Minnesota, Wisconsin ourselves,
I could
and
email.
different clubs are interested in working, I know, in the issue of sexual trafficking and that sort of thing. For example, I'm in the Roseville Club, and we've done some funding to help the Roseville Police Department have an extra person on staff to work with that they didn't have just from regular taxes, I think. But are there other places that we could look for who those organizations are, or your mother could provide it to us, and
Yes, of
addresses
course.
and things like that?
Yeah, we can make up a list, and I'm sure my mom can email, or I could come up with a list and email somebody and kind of go from there. We can.
I think that would be great.
Yeah. Just like one of the I just really strongly believe that the education piece of it is a big thing too. Understanding our history and what brought it, and how it affects us today is a huge thing. Because once people can see and open their eyes to that, is a really good start. And if we could do that in schools, that would be my dream, is to see that in schools. Because we are perceived in a way that, you know, we don't work and we drink, we're drunks and we're lazy, and, you know, there's just so many different ways that we're viewed, that if we can plant the seed and show our history in schools, and kids can learn this in school, I feel like it's the seed of having more of an open mind to what issues my people face.
Are you familiar with David or Antoine Troyer?
Yes.
Their books?
Yep.
Would you recommend them?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, I know David has just done a book. Let's see, I actually have it here. The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, which I think I recommended in one of my minutes that I sent out.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
Yes, even to learn more even about Red Lake, is he has a book on Red Lake. He's he speaks our language. He runs midday ceremonies. He's a really good guy. That's a good source. Any book by him is a good source.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Ghetto installation.
I know you're getting restless to get going.
No, it's okay. My brother was coming to the car, and I wanted to make sure my daughter stopped him before, because I didn't want him to open the door and start asking me something.
Yes. No, your mom is amazing, and so are you.
Thank you.
We're very, very proud of you. Thank you for just stepping in on such short notice.
You're welcome. I
And
was
doing such a great job.
Thank you. I was so nervous.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Star, for sharing. This was great, and yeah, this was a lot of information and a lot of your passion of what you want to see for the future, and what we hopefully we can help with that, and just be more aware of these inequalities and how we are a part of the bias ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for being brave and sharing this story. Your stories, plural.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Star.
you very much, Star. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing some interesting insights.
Star, if you would like to go, unless you have a question for us.
Nope, that should be everything that I had to say. There's probably be more things I wish to say that I'll remember later on, but
you can write them to me and I'll ask on your behalf.
Okay. All right.
Thank you to your mom. I'll talk to her later.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice day, everybody.
And travel safe.
Yep, thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye. So this is our last one. I feel like I'm gonna miss you guys.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a question. Al, what could you tell me the name of those authors again?
Yeah, well, this one is by David Troyer, Treuer. The Heartbeat,
okay.
Wounded Knee. Little history, his parents, his father is Robert Troyer, who was an author, and his mother was Peggy Troyer, who was a member of Red Lake and a lawyer that I happened to know when I lived in Bemidji, and actually became the federal magistrate for northern Minnesota and did some of the cases up on the Red Lake Reservation, some of those federal cases that, the preliminary hearings and things like that. And they raised two sons, Antoine Troyer and David Troyer, who both became authors and have written some good books. And this is the latest one, which is probably the most energetic one. And it's Native America from 1890 to the present. It really is a history of Native Americans, American Indians. And it's I've just got it, so I haven't read it that far. I've read other books. And it's a good book. My wife finished it and gave it to me. There's just good book. And he's written other ones, so if you look it up.
Yeah, look him up. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Oh, type the author's name. I will do that in chat.
So what do you guys want to see happen for Rotary from here forward?
I'm kind of sitting on the ethics committee, and I have been raising some issues about the four-way test and how it's kind of culturally insensitive in a way. And so I'm hoping to get some more thinking going on that. The particular example I can start with is the question, is it the truth? And the answer is, to the Enlightenment liberal, yes, there's an objective truth. That's what the Enlightenment was all about, was being able to identify objective truth. But to the postmodernist frame of mind, truth is a subjective reality. And it's always fun to watch that subjectivity get tied into physics and all the stuff that physics tells us about free will. But the real point being that, is it the truth, is only simple as it's just a simplification of a much more complex question. From my perspective, almost any statement of truth is actually a probability of truth. And the examples I use are, if the statement is, there are no tigers in the Northfield area, that's as close you're going to get to subjective and objective truth. But if the question is, are there any mountain lions in the Northfield area? Well, I've seen one. I know that there are mountain lions in this area. And therefore, it's a probability as to whether there's one here right now or not. And
so number one, we tackle the four-way test. And
exactly. And we ask how to make that more culturally across, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Khadijah. That's what I was trying to say.
in many, why say it in one word when you can do 27, right, Bruce?
I'm a mathematician. You're lucky I didn't get that 400.
But how do you deal with some of those probabilities that are extremely low? I see the probability of the law of gravity does not apply.
Mr. Hartford, you know better than entertain Bruce by now, don't you?
You do a lot of what's the worst that could happen thinking.
So what else do we want to see moving forward, like in training Rotary to be, and this is my thought, is that I think taking personal responsibility for what happened, because right now what we keep saying is the government did it, but the government, we build the government. I would like to see Rotarians start with that universal apology of, I was part of it, I participated in this, I was alive for it, because America is not old enough to have ancient history. We were present for all of this history. So if I can see Rotarians say, I was there when people were being marched to South Dakota, when Native Americans were being treated this way, I was here. And I apologize for that personally. I would like to see personal responsibility. So what do we do? But I take responsibility for being part of that society, for being part of that community that perpetuated, that created this horrible system. I think what we're trying to, a lot of times, which really, really frustrates me, is that we are dodging this. We're saying, or it was done, the government did it, I wasn't, whatever, but I think all of us were alive while these things were happening. But I don't know how to put that into asking people to see our role in it. And apologize on behalf of our people.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Hi, this is Lindy, and I have read White Fragility, and I didn't know if anybody else had read it. It does a really nice job of talking about how racism is built into our system. And even if we don't think of ourselves as racist, there are things that happen, things that we experience every day, unfortunately, that either something that we think or feel, or the way that somebody's experiencing the world, or something's being said or done. And we, like you're saying, we can own that and apologize and question, and to, instead of calling somebody out for doing something, we can call them in and acknowledge. It's like when you go to the airport and you see something, say something, but acknowledge in a way that will encourage conversation, so it's at least a neutral to a positive experience. And if somebody says to you, I don't see race, or I wasn't brought up with racism, we absolutely know that is not true because of where we live. And so have a conversation just to say, well, so you're saying you grew up in an all white neighborhood. What was your experience? You know, you obviously knew what race was. What did it mean to you? What did you think about that? And I don't know, there's just some really good ways in there to at least start acknowledging that racism is a system here. And then a resource that I've been going to help me lately is, and they have classes here as well with really good resources, is the American Friends Service Committee has been doing a class called Radical Acting in Faith. And you can watch the webinars, and it's not even necessarily for people of religious or spiritual background, but Radical Acting in Faith, it talks about how to have this conversation with people and to make it a positive experience, to keep the door open. So those are two resources that can really help. Thank you.
Lindy, our church has been studying white fragility now over the last 3 years. We've done 2 sets of adult education programs over several weeks, a couple of times, and it's really it's helpful, but it's really a difficult one to do. And I happen to come from a church with a wide variety of people of races and backgrounds, which is kind of helpful too, because I can begin to hear you begin to learn directly from some of your friends that you, as Minnesota Nice, you don't talk about very much. And I would add another book. I don't know if I mentioned to this group before, but that's a book called Filter Shift. It's a very small one by Sarah Taylor. I've been doing a lot of work at the American Swedish Institute, and we're concerned about diversity issues at the Institute, because I'm on that board at the moment, and where it sits now in very close to 38th and Chicago. But the author posits that basically we're all impacted by a lot of things in our lives as we've been growing up that lead us to kind of, without our realizing it, react in different ways to different people. And the hardest thing is to try to recognize what things those are in your life, and then figure out if there's some way that you can shift those filters that that change the way you look at, or that show you how that you look at other people and how you react with them, to be more cognizant of what you're doing, and trying to be more open in accepting other people as well. So that's another interesting, and it's quite a small one, but it's very powerful. Filter Shift by Sarah Taylor, S-A-R-A, Taylor.
On that note, I just wanted to chime in. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I love all the book recommendations. I like to read, and our Rotaract Club actually started a book club for books specifically on racial justice. So White Fragility, we read that one. We meet once a month. We do a book a month. We've only done 2 so far, that and How to Be Anti-Racist. So as people read books, if you'd like to send some our way. We already have our quote syllabus or schedule for the year planned out, but we're always looking for supplemental book recommendations. So feel free to send some my way. And also an invitation, if you're sitting there thinking I could use some more education, some more reading, anyone is welcome to come. We've actually have a couple other Rotarians that have joined us as well. So you guys are always welcome to come. I just wanted to throw that out there because as you're speaking, I'm reiterating, we've read White Fragility. I'm like, yep, I've learned some of those things too. And it was really eye-opening and really beneficial. And it's helped me have more language as I have these conversations and give me perspective I otherwise wouldn't hear. And so I found it very beneficial. And I am reading so many books now, and it's been really eye-opening.
Yeah, Amada pointed out that you sent us a book list earlier, which I think is on one of my minutes.
Yes, I have.
Sorry.
I can't remember the meeting you did it at, but I'm pretty sure I put it on my minutes that I sent out to everybody. Your link to the book list.
Yeah, thank you. If someone needs it, I can send it again. It keeps growing, so there's quite a few up there now. But I always seem to find more ones, so I'll be reading for forever.
I would like to add something to that, which I guess bothers me a little bit, is that when it comes to reading books about the struggles of people of color, the moment the only people you're reading are white people, or the only people you're willing to talk to are white people about these issues, we will continue to have this problem. So White Fragility, I'm just gonna be blunt here, was written by a white woman who has made billions now on the pains of Black people. I'm sure there's Black writers who have written on the same topic who are not benefiting from their own pain. She is not going to contribute any of that money to any cause whatsoever.
It is my understanding that she is married to an African man who
doesn't matter. It doesn't make her Black.
Wrote my grandmother's.
I'm married to a white man. That doesn't make my husband Black or me white.
Yeah. So Amanda had a question earlier that we haven't been able to get to.
Yes, can I please run this? Thank you. But what I'm trying to say is the moment we say the only people we can listen to on these conversations have to be white speakers, or the only books we can read are written by white people to understand this or even have this conversation, then why? What's the point?
Khadija, do you mind if I comment?
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with you. So our book club is a mixed group of people as far as racial identities. And some of the people of color in our group did ask, okay, White Fragility, like a white author to white voice, is this a good starting place? And I agree with you that those concerns are valid. Is a white voice the place to start? Trying to do my best to kind of paraphrase those conversations we had as we got started. I mean, even having a book club, there's some articles out there when bad stuff happens to white people, or when bad stuff happens to Black people, white people join book clubs. And it's this idea of, okay, education is good. Education is good when you're paying authors, especially authors of color. Education is good when you're not draining the people of color in your life and you're getting that education from people who have thought it out and want to share it. So there is a benefit to book clubs, but as long as there's action, as long as they're not all one voice, as long as, I mean, there's so many different complex ways to look at it. And White Fragility, I would say to anyone, should not be your only book. If you are a white person, the way I looked at it for me, a white person that's like, how do I begin this journey? How do I begin to realize that I have an identity racially, that I have to think that I'm part of the conversation and that I have to own that I am part of a race. So I will say books like White Fragility, or we also read White Rage and Waking Up White. Some of the white people in the group did supplemental work, not the whole group. Thought it was helpful to do that so we could come into the conversation. I mean, I'm not doing great justice to the words, but in that being, a lot of people of color have understood from a younger age that they have a certain racial identity. And a lot of white people can go through a lot of their life not understanding that and get into adulthood and not have done that racial identity development. And so if you're coming as a white person into that space, that for me, those books have been helpful to help me understand that foundational level that a lot of people of color kind of have. And the people of color in the group who had read White Fragility found it helpful because it helped them understand a lot of those underlying things that they're like, I'm hitting my head against a wall when I talk to white people about race. Why? And they were excited to read White Fragility because it gave them a deeper understanding into some of the conversations they've had in the past. Go, oh, that's what's going on, or that's maybe what you were thinking, or that's why we were talking past each other. And it led to some really good conversations. Were they comfortable? No, but our group had really good conversations, and it gave us a good footing to get started. And that's why too, we made sure going forward that there are a couple white authors, but we also have lots of authors of color from various walks of life. Yes, lots of Black authors, Native authors, Latin authors, Asian authors, bringing in that diversity of voice when it comes to the racial dialogue. So I just wanted to point that out. I agree with you. There can definitely be a misstep when let's have white people only talk to white people, and let's have white people read white authors and put more money in white pockets. Like, I agree that that could be a misstep. But I just would be remiss to not point out that having at least the experience I had, that I think there are still ways to kind of keep that conversation going, and that getting a book from a white author in and of itself isn't bad, but you have to look at context and progress.
I understand that, and I love books. Any book is a good book.
But, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Could I, Braver Angels is doing a whole series of one-on-one conversations, and they started with Red with Blue. I'm part of a couple of those. They also started an urban versus and rural one-on-one conversation where you just sit down with one other person from the other side, if you will. Do you think that model might work to help cross the racial divide as well, or is that something that only a family therapist would dream of?
No, that's a great idea, and that does work. And we've done that kind of thing in our church. We've got a number of Black families. We've got a number of Hispanic. We have a great variety of LGBT people in the church. So whatever topic you want to talk about. And from time to time, our pastors have said, you know, when we have coffee after church, most of the time, this was of course before COVID, but most of the time you talk with the people you know. And so from time to time, they'll say, today, don't talk to anybody. You are.
I'd like to add something if Ted is on pause right now.
Yeah. Literally on pause.
Initially, Khadija had asked for apologies for people from our parts we played in history. And I would say in my history, I was born in the 70s, and the most recent civic or like civil rights issues that I've been seeing are, I would say, like the line 3 discussion about native lands and corporations saying we don't care about those treaties. We are going to put our line here anyway. And the fact that the police were there and people were peacefully protesting, and people went from all over the country there. And I did send a little money there. I did buy a yard sign, but I have guilt that I didn't do more than that. And one of the sad facts is that, you know, we're comfortable in our own world and with our own, like, I need to go to the grocery store, I have a job, I can't spend time going up to this protest, even though in my heart it's so important, and water is life, and water is, we can't replace water. We can't drink oil, you know, we can't drink money. And so I have apologies for not doing a better part in that. I also, you know, daily think about the families that are in cages along the border. And I can tell you that would not be happening if they were white people. If we had people, they would not not be putting in cages if they were white. And so, but am I down there protesting? You know, no, I'm here. My representatives in this area are already, if they have opportunities to vote on anything about this, they already know my opinions. And so I've done as much as I can, I feel like, but I wish I could do more. But I don't know what else I can do to help fight against these inequities. And yeah, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry that I can't do more, and I have allowed things to happen sort of on my watch and not, you know, done what I could, I guess, for those things.
There are lots of cultural ways to approach apologies, and different cultures say that an apology doesn't count unless the person you're apologizing to is in front of you and basically renders a confirmed on that apology. And there are other cultures that will accept apologies without anybody being around. You can basically sit down and pray to God and get an apology out that way. And for me, and this is going to sound white fragility, but I'm sorry, this is the way I feel. My Irish background does not leave me a lot of love for the Brits. And I feel very little ownership for a lot of things that happened 200 years ago because my people were not much better off back then. And in fact, so much so that when I went to a water walk training session here in Northfield with Native American people, they introduced one of the people who was a camera person who was going to film the water walk and lace in the Irish experience. So I thought that was interesting too. But at the same time, I know that's white fragility because I don't like being accused of things that I wasn't there for, any more than I suspect you guys want to be accused of having been part of the Cold War and holding the Russians hostage. And, you know, because we held them at missile point, ICBM point and bomber point. And I don't expect any of you to apologize for that to the Russians, even though it's the kind of thing that when Middle East terrorists do it to a cruise ship, we get all indignant. And if you don't think that keeps me awake some nights because I was a long part of that fight. And some mornings I wake up proud of the fact that I fought in that fight. And some mornings I wake up and wish I could find someone to apologize to. And I appreciate you all listening to me kind of go off the page there.
Thank you. Bruce, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
If I can just go back and suggest one more book, and Khadija, it is by a Black author, and it's Between the World and Me. And it's written by Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is probably more famous for writing the Black Panther comic books.
I love him.
Coming up in our book club.
Yeah, good book.
Throwing out there.
But he wrote Between the World and Me, which is a book-length letter to his son about the challenges he's going to face growing up as a Black man. And, you know, it has a lot of his experiences in that, and it's really a moving book. So I'd recommend that. He's an excellent writer, and he writes easily because he writes comic books. So it's not, you know, it's not hard to read, but very moving book.
I'd just like to make a comment. I keep, my internet is popping me in and out all the time. So I start saying something and I disappear. But I just wanted to comment kind of in general about some of these books and so on. It kind of relates to what we were talking about earlier today, and that was and what she was saying about one of the things that she would love to have us do about Native American people is to educate ourselves. And it's important to read the books and the history, I think, from a variety of perspectives and see the whole kind of thing. But then we got to work on it ourselves, and then we've got to move beyond just the education. And specifically with white fragility, Khadija, the book was recommended to us at my church by some Black members, and they helped us lead the discussions. I agree with you in terms of some of the other things you said there as well, but it's a place to start. It's just one piece, and we got to add to it a lot of these other things. I appreciate very much the books you've been listing already here about with some more Black authors and the Native Americans as well. So it's just a starting point, and then from there we got to take actions ourselves, like Amada's saying.
My question to all of us, after all this time we've been meeting, where are we individually? Where is your heart? What do you feel? Has anything in your mind changed? Anything improved as far as this struggle goes? So personally, in your soul, in your heart,
I don't know if it's
where
in.
are we at?
Yeah, I don't know if it's in my heart necessarily, but it's clear now that my understanding of white privilege has been
Bruce,
expanded.
I was gonna joke. Do you have a heart? I'm kidding.
You know the old
Tease
saying,
you,
and
right?
all right. Anyway, yes, I now have an understanding of how. I didn't really realize that when my trailer trash father was able to get a loan for a house out in the country, or for land out in the country. So
First of all, don't call your father that.
well, he was hillbilly, hard and true, a great man. Rose above his own raising. But in any case, that was a white privilege that I didn't realize I had. But at the same time, I think about the fact that by the time I was 4 years old when I went to first grade, and I already knew how to read, and I knew how to sit and pass all the tests so that I could go into the first grade without having to go into kindergarten. And that was part of my white privilege too. And it's a combination of the Irish culture that my mom put into me, coupled with the privilege of being in a secure world where I didn't have to worry about, where I could go out and play and I didn't have to worry about anything. And that's a white privilege too. So I learned those things.
Can I jump in as well, because I share Bruce's view that clearly my view of the things that I've benefited from by being a white man, my understanding of that has increased greatly. And let me share, if I can, for 2 seconds, a personal story. Until I moved to Minnesota 20 some years ago, I'd never lived in a place that was as white as this particular state is. And when I was growing up in upstate New York, one of the things we used to do as a family in the fall was go to the green corn festivals on the Onondaga Reservation. I came to learn a great deal about the Iroquois Nation and the members of that thing. We, eventually the Army took me to southern Colorado, and I lived in a community that was very much largely Hispanic. We moved from there to a university town in Northern California that was pretty diverse. Now, granted, most of that diversity came from folks with international backgrounds rather than folks who were largely native or African American in the traditional sense that folks use that term. It wasn't until we got here to Minnesota that we sort of lived in a community, and we, as an example, we were one of our early years, we went down to the Renaissance Festival, and we were getting in our car to leave, and happened to observe a black man who was getting in his car to leave the parking lot as well. My wife said, "Do you realize that's the first black face I've seen today?" And it struck, that was true. But because we also spent a lot of time in the Southwest, we got to spend some time on the I've been on several of the pueblos in New Mexico. We got to become somewhat enamored of the Navajo culture. And I thought I was really pretty much aware, particularly of native cultures. And yet I found myself slapped up the side of the head here about 4 weeks ago. I was on a Zoom, or I guess it was a Facebook Live meeting that was being done by the CEO of the Squaw Valley Ski Corporation. Now, we happen to have a timeshare up in what California many years ago renamed as Olympic Valley. But here was the ski, and it never occurred to me, and I've known for decades that that was a derogatory term. And yet, casually would wander around and talk about our place up at Squaw Valley. And, you know, so even when you think you maybe have some awareness, you know, one of the things that some of this has done is realize that, yeah, you may have some, but every now and then you have to step back and realize, yeah, but I missed that one. And I think that's one of the things that's come out of this for me, is that certainly, you know, I make no claims of being perfect or anywhere even close to it, but clearly my own personal awareness has been raised a great deal.
Thank you so much, Doug. That means a lot to hear that, and those words that we just have said, and our culture has said it's okay to say those things, you know, too. It's not like, you know, you went out and you said, what's a word I could say that's offensive, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It was an appropriate thing. And now having that awareness, and then to think back like, oh, all those times we said that, I didn't even, you know.
You know, and, you know, had that place been N-word Valley, we'd have known right away it was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had a similar experience. I was in Bemidji and with some family, and they had their baby all wrapped up, and I said, oh, you know, he's all wrapped up like a little papoose, and they were like, that's not really appropriate around here. Mm-hmm. Like that term is used for Native families, and that is like a reverent word that you only want to use for your Native baby, that you would wrap up like that. You don't just throw that word around. And I did not know at all. And I'm so glad that someone said that to me. And I'm glad that, like Vicky said, I'm glad someone, you know, stood up and said something, and they didn't just think about their own comfort. They didn't say it to embarrass me. You know, they said it as because it was wrong, because it's the right thing to do. And I think that us learning this stuff, like you said, has been the goal of this. Yeah, thank you. We have more people who have kind of had a similar experience to Doug, where their just eyes have been open to, I just took this for granted, and now you can't go back, right? Right, Doug?
No,
yeah.
And you know, I'm sure I'll make another one somewhere along the way. You know, and I hope someone will be kind enough to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, that doesn't work, because it's been, I guess on the education thing, I expect to be continually educated until the day I'm taken from this earth.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. So this is Dale. Because I think this has been so enlightening just the past several months with everything that's been going on. And I haven't been able to make a whole lot of these meetings because of my work schedule. But I will relate. We had some of our neighbors over. Gosh, I can't remember, maybe the 4th of July or so. But anyway, the bottom line is that one of our neighbors was discussing, he comes from Boston, and one of his very good friends is a principal of a middle school. And he was explaining how outside of Boston, when he runs, he has to take his ID because he's Hispanic. And he'd been pulled over 3 times and asked for an ID. And we think, when is the last time I went out running in my neighborhood and felt like I needed an ID? And why should anybody feel that need? And it's when I hear stories like that I am made so completely aware of how much privilege we have based on our skin color. And we don't see it because we don't necessarily realize it's happening to others. I'll also tell you of a time that I wish I had spoken up that I didn't, was when Hayward, Wisconsin was looking at buying or getting another canine dog for the unit. And they were talking about how if you pull somebody over, these are drug sniffing dogs along with everything else, but how they can't keep a car there waiting for the dog to come. But if it takes a while and the drug sniffing dog happens to come by, they can sniff your car and decide whether or not to therefore search your car. And what I realized was that was total racial profiling, because I knew that if I got pulled over, they wouldn't be calling in, holding me up a little bit to get the drug sniffing dog there, but I could be sure that if I was off the reservation, they would slow things down to get the drug sniffing dog. And so that was total racial profiling. And I should have raised my hand in that Rotary meeting and saying, is this what we want to be a part of? I get how great they are for finding lost 3-year-olds in the woods. I get that. But they're being used as a racial profiling strategy, and that is so wrong. And so from now on, I mean, I guess I've come to the point of not being a non-racist, but hopefully an anti-racist who stands up and brings to light these things when people make comments that are just off.
Thank you so much. Can you believe how when I mean, it just makes me sick to my stomach to say this out loud, but you are right on topic with the fact that dogs have been used and were used to sniff and trace and find Black slaves. And they were not just finding them back then. I mean, now we hope with police dogs, and I work with the police, and you know, I'm not anti-police, I'm anti-bad people and bad policy. But yeah, the reason that there is a link of that is dogs literally would chase slaves down and attack them, and people would literally sick the dogs on them. That's really what that word means. And if you can think about a human being was treated that way because somebody owned them, you can think why Black men and other people of color aren't going to always stick around if they think there's a way that they could possibly leave and not get killed. You can see that is just in their bones as a culture, because that's what happened to them. And with George Floyd, even he, you know, the new video that came out, he knew they were going to kill him. You know, he was like, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. It was about a check, apparently. But in his head right away, he was like, please don't kill me. And I don't know when any people in this Rotary meeting, maybe Khadijah can have that same worry. But yeah, if the police talk to me, I'm not thinking initially, please don't kill me. I'm thinking a lot of other things, but not necessarily that. So thank you for that story about the dogs. That just is chilling to hear that. And it just being offered so nonchalantly, like you said.
Does anyone mind if I speak?
Go ahead.
I wanted to go to kind of what Amada was asking, and back to Khadijah's question of, you know, kind of through all this, some learning and takeaway and some points of privilege and learning. I think for me, in the circles I run with, I am quite active in that I've been to many protests. I've done protests for George Floyd. I went to the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. I mean, that's in my history. I am quick to act when I see injustice. So for me, my learning is through 3 things, I would say. One is more conversation outside my circles of people like this. You know, we gotta do something about this. Let's go protest. But talking to other people and seeing people on the other side, what they're thinking, or people who think differently than me, and having those conversations and being able to sit in that discomfort. Being a young person who hasn't been alive for a lot of the things that some of you have, and beyond that, you know, our whole history and stuff, I'm doing my own research now and my own understanding and my own education for the history that brought us to where we are today. Because I can look at things from this is how I'm dealing with it, this is how people of my generation, my friend group, how we're dealing with this, but we don't always, and here's what we think we should have or want to see going forward, which is a good thing to look forward and want that change. But I'm realizing I need to see more of the history that brought us to where we are, because it will help me understand. And with that, I think too, going forward, things that I can be more active in is looking specifically at anti-racist policy around me. While I may not be a politician who can enact, you know, legislative change that can help groups of people, in my sphere of influence, what am I doing? and doing research in policies that are impacting people and seeing the ways that I can contribute, whether it's my time or donations or the way I vote or things like that. And also what was asked earlier, I appreciated Amada doing the apology. I will also do one as well. I mean, I am a white person and I had been, I guess, ignorant to an extent for a long period of time. I can't think of specific instances where I can say, oh my gosh, I should have done something. But I definitely, having read a lot of the books I've read, can say that I have easily fallen into the white solidarity category, where I didn't see overt racism that I felt the need to stand up for, but it's more of the covert racism or the things said in white spheres that I should have just said, hey, not okay, not appropriate. And I just kind of went along as normal. And so I think for me, that's my current challenge, is to have the strength to do that. And also pick and choose times. Do I need to be the one that does it at every moment, every time? If I'm going to be that person, what is the benefit? And how am I bringing people in love and not calling out? So that's some of my takeaways and learning.
Now imagine me sitting in a group like Rotary and having to listen to whether I'm worthy, and having to listen on why I shouldn't be killed or my sons should not be killed, and listen to this conversation as a Black woman sitting here with you guys thinking, why are we even having this? Am I not a human being? Why is this even a discussion?
It's terrible. It's terrible that we have, this country has been built on benefiting from slavery, keeping certain people in power. You know, it started before the country was a country, and it is wrong. It shouldn't be something we have to discuss.
And then I have to contain myself. So the moment I lose it, I'm the mad Black woman again, as usual. I'm cool with that, by the way.
I'd like to take this a little different direction.
Yes,
that's okay.
Thank you, Lauren. Where are we
what,
going?
What I do for a living is I help dentists buy and sell practices. So I end up dealing with a whole array of different people. In order to do that, I'm required to have a real estate license. As I think about the real estate license and all the different rules and regulations that are involved there, I think back to the initial theory that I learned a long time ago, is that the first thing you do is you legislate change, and then people will gradually adapt to it. I think what we're trying to do is create a change without the help of the legislation. And here's how that works. As I study the real estate laws, I understand about the discrimination that I am not allowed to use. And when I run into people that want to encourage me to discriminate in some way, I have to say to them, I cannot discriminate, and I won't do that for you. And so it changes my behavior such that every time I meet a new client, I speak with them as an equal. And I don't care what their name is. I don't care what color their skin is. I don't care what their religion is. All those things are outside the boundaries that I'm allowed to do. Consequently, I just don't do them. And I think a lot of people end up feeling very comfortable dealing with me because I have that firm boundary built into the way I operate. And I'm wondering, as a society, should we have that kind of legislation passed that so it's embedded in more people so that they just understand that they can't operate in those ways? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Let's put it into the policing where you cannot just kill a person and get away with it. Those are things we can legislate very quickly. No?
Is that just, you can't kill a person, but it's because they're of a certain color, you can't do it.
No,
because
just
they're of a certain
don't kill
religion or
anybody
creed.
just because you don't like them. Don't kill anyone at all, unless they're trying to kill you.
Right. Yeah, there comes a dividing line there somewhere.
Especially don't kill somebody because of their skin color.
Yes, I think
And
that
if you do, there's consequences.
absolutely, you are spot on.
That is easy to do. I think that should be the quickest one right now, because as Black people, we're worried about danger. Not just those white people out there policing us, it's also the police officers that think they have the right to kill us, especially our boys. So as Rotary, what do we do to help this happen?
It kind of brings me back to where I think I kind of was having some thinking early on all of these conversations, which if we want things to change legislatively, we've got to elect people who are willing to do that. If we are going to elect people who are willing to do that, people need to get out and vote for them. It's probably pretty clear that those who are opposed to any kind of change are going to vote. So what do we do, or how do we do, and can Rotary play a role in helping to get more folks out to vote, and just in general? Because I think the more people who vote, the more likely the outcome of the vote is to reflect the feelings of the majority of the community, whatever that may be. And I mean, I'm all for getting everybody out to vote who's eligible to vote, and I don't have any particular interest. I mean, I know what I think, but if I'm trying to get people to vote, my role isn't to convince them how to vote, it's to convince them to vote. And can we as Rotarians assist somehow in that arena beyond simply encouraging most of our fellow Rotarians to vote, who probably do vote anyway?
Yeah, I would agree. I think I agree with you, Doug. The next step would be is, what can we do in our individual communities? Because I go back to Lauren's point. Yes, legislation can change behavior, but I'm sure we've all heard the saying. There's an old saying that says, you can't legislate morality. If that was the case, then the civil rights laws that we passed in the 1960s, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I think the first step is you can protect individuals, you can modify behavior, but I've always said you've got to get to the heart. You've got to get people to have a change in their inner thinking and their inner feelings if you really want true change. I think Rotary in particular, we've always kind of walked that main line. We didn't really want to get involved in politics. I don't think you necessarily have to be out staging rallies necessarily, but I think basically we need a much more we can have a much more positive role in the dialogue, really similar to kind of like what Braver Angels is doing. Just facilitate the discussion. Make sure that the public is aware and has access to what those beliefs are.
Yeah, and I think there's a pattern here. First of all, you start with the legislation. Mm-hmm. And the legislation requires that you act differently. And as you act differently, your actions of acting differently towards people start to change the heart. So I think there's a progression that goes along there. And when you start to act differently like you have a heart, pretty soon you start to have a heart.
But that may take generations. Who knows? I mean, from what we've seen, it doesn't happen. I hear what you're saying, but it's a longer term process. It's not a, A and B equals C.
Yeah, but at least it's a process and it's moving in a direction.
It is.
And that's better than not doing anything.
I agree.
So what do we want to see? And first of all, how many of you are interested in more than here? So you want to be able to go to your clubs and talk about this conversation, which I have a lot of disdain for, but I'm willing to do it, that can start talking about equity and inclusion, justice, and in a way that makes sense, that helps you to be comfortable, so you can ask the questions you have and then have a good answer for it. And I'm trying to put together a panel of Native Americans, African Americans, Caucasians, so everybody, a lot of, most of them young people who can talk about this topic in a way that will help all of us as Rotarians move forward. I keep thinking our district could be the model that can start to educate the rest of everyone on how to see this. We are different people. There's nothing wrong with that. We should be different people. But we have to be able to live together in a way that gives opportunity to everyone, regardless of their difference. We don't have to even like each other. That's okay with me. But if the playing field is level, so every human being is able to accomplish, my son has equal chance as your son. My grandchild has the same chance as your grandchild, according to how hard they work. If they're lazy, then too bad, We're not asking for anything other than, please, number one, stop killing us. Number two, can we just have a chance? Our schools. Can you stop moving just because you have a neighbor that is Black that moved next door? We don't bite, right? So small things like that just needs to change in society in general, that I think Rotary can start that movement, that Caucasian people don't have to be afraid of everybody else. I understand a lot of the actions is motivated by fear. There's nothing to fear. Maybe we can start to share that. So after the 4-way test, what else do you want in your program? And do you want it? I'll start with Ken. Thank you for speaking up. You're usually the quiet one.
Not really.
Could I say something?
Yes, Ms. Derrida.
I just think it would be important to do some practicing about talking to other people, and maybe Bruce was one with Braver Angels that could help us with that. But I have found myself in situations where I have brought up what I've been learning. My head is exploding, my heart is exploding, Khadijah, and I just want to share with others what I feel like I've learned. But practicing doing that in a way of bringing in love versus calling out in anger or shaming others. I just would like to see some help in that process, and maybe there's a better place or way to do that. You've certainly given lots of different ways. I know I'm white, so I'm going to end up, it's not going to affect me if I don't get out there and change the world yesterday in the same way that it's going to affect Khadijah and her sons. I apologize for that. I don't know how to change that in a day, but I want to change it one conversation at a time. Thank you all for having this conversation.
Thank you so much. Wow.
One of the
Really?
fears of discrimination I ran into a while back was I had a woman who was a dentist and moving into kind of a blue collar neighborhood and truly fearful of discrimination. And I looked at her and I said, yes, you are going to be discriminated against. But it's not going to be on the basis of the color of your skin. It's going to be on the basis of the way you take care of your patients. So take care of your patients and, you know, make a contribution to society. And I think you'll be accepted very well. And so I just happened to run into her a couple of years later. And she looked at me and she said, oh, Lauren, you were right. I didn't experience the discrimination I expected. I was there. I did good things. I took care of the patients. And it's the best thing I could have done in my life. And so, and in this case, it puts more of a burden on her. The other way, we're taking the burden on ourselves. And I think it's kind of a shared thing where we all have to learn how to accept each other and work with each other and treat each other as equals. And I think that's going to be the ideal solution.
How do we fix the system we've built? Because Lauren, your heart is amazing. I really like how you think. So we've built a system that me, a Black woman I've only had a parking ticket because I parked facing the wrong direction, and I just come from Kenya 17 years ago. But the moment I see a police officer car behind me, I've never gotten a ticket in my life for anything. I panic. And I have to get out of his way or her way as quickly as I can. Because I worry I may not come out of this alive. So we may change, and Lauren, you're easy to, you are there already. But then there's a lot of us who still think otherwise. Still consider in the system continues to think of us as Black people as less. And how we're described, and how our boys, I mean, they're tall, and so it looks like they're menacing all the time. There's a lot of tall white boys, they don't call looking like demons or stuff like that in police reports.
I'm just thinking you're taking this from the other side.
I have to, Lauren.
what would happen? You know, we've got police that are to some degree aloof. And maybe it's going up to the police and talking with them and asking for direction. Something as simple as, hey, can I get some help with directions here? I need a hand. Whether you need them or not is irrelevant. But it opens up the conversation, and it's a place where you can peacefully dialogue with them and get some help from them, and you can become a person at that point. And I hate to say it, it's putting the pressure on you to initiate that dialogue, but I think it's a dialogue that needs to happen somehow. And if the only thing you're doing is running away from the police and avoiding the police, then they're going to look at people like that suspiciously. I know when I take off and start to go too fast, they look at me suspiciously and they pull me up, and all of a sudden I've got a flashing red light on my tail. And then I'm kind of in a defensive position. But if I can talk with them one-on-one up front and initiate the conversation, it puts a whole different tenor to that conversation. Does that make any sense?
No, but I get it. Anyway, so what next? What would you guys like to see in your next conversations about equity and inclusion? We said the 4-way test and a challenge to that. I think we moved into, so what do we do individually as clubs to address some of these things? And I'm getting the feeling that we don't know.
This is just one thought. Since we've had Bruce here, not I think he signed off, but for Braver Angels, it seems like theirs is a conversation across the line politically. If they're willing to do one across the line in other identities, or if there's an organization that does that, our clubs could all host those sorts of functions. That could be another, I mean, a lot of Rotaries do Strive program mentorship for youth. A lot of Rotaries do blood drives. That could be another pillar, kind of staple Rotary thing where we do, if it's Braver Angels, or we do something where like we're a go-to workshop provider for people to better understand interracial dialogue and fighting racism, or talking across the fence, or whatever that phrase is called. I mean, that's just off the top of my head, one idea that fits into something that seems within our realm. Just throwing it out there. Stop. I'm okay if you hate it, but just throwing it out there.
That's what I was talking about earlier. About, I think you have to kind of pick where do you want to start? Do you want to start at the legislative level, at the district level, but in our communities, Rotary, in our individual clubs, I see Rotary could be that, what you were talking about, Rachel, could be a facilitator, could be a go-to for that type of dialogue and that type of conversation. I think that's the biggest. I think the biggest takeaway from our group is we want to take action. Well, where do we want to start? What does that action look like? Is it going to be on an individual, local, community level? Is it going to be across a broader spectrum? Do we get more engaged with the legislative process? I mean, I think those are some of the thoughts that I've kind of been listening to and kind of thinking if I was going to go forward to say what are next steps.
I mean, are other clubs? Oh, sorry. The Lakeville Club, like we have police that come to our club and we like thank them for their service in our community. Do other clubs have relations with their police department? Because there could be a starting conversation there to see if there's issues within the community in this regard, since some of us already have those relationships. Another angle. Also on a club level, as I've said, we started a book club, so education, conversation, you know, tangible action. My one thing that does keep coming up in my head when we talk about legislation is yes, personally I agree, but there is an issue with 501c3 statuses and their ability to push for certain like lobbying type stuff, like putting because of the nonprofit status, their ability to put any of their power behind certain legislative things. So that would be like something to tread lightly, just to figure out how we're doing things in an ethical way based on some of our nonprofit statuses. Just throwing that out there as like a tiny bit of that conversation.
Personally, I don't know that I would be thanking any police officer anytime soon. Personally, I think that Rotary, and from what I've heard so far in defending the stances, is very the typical tone deaf. Rachel, you're an exception. You're invited to the cookout, you and Ted.
I want to say I brought the police thing up as but
what I'm saying is that if we're going to want anyone else joining Rotary, some of the things we've considered traditional and acceptable needs to stop.
Can you give us an example, Khadija?
So I look all over everything that Rotary does. First of all, I'm considered loud, and I'm cool with that. And so the police thing, the roses thing, and then actually the one that I actually have a lot of issue with is that when we do things abroad and we name it after ourselves, it's such a colonial way of thinking that how can you have a project, I'll just use Ted for an example, which he hasn't named anything after himself, he should, but something in the middle of Uganda, and we call it the Johnson School. And Rotary has this all over the world where it's a white named project in the middle of a tribe that is so colonialist. So I have a long list of everything. I'm like, can you just name it after, let the people find a name for it. Let them find a local name, even if they insist on it, which they will, because it's polite. It's the right thing for them to do. But that is, and then insisting, oh, you have to learn English. That is such a, so to me, it's just all this thing that continues to perpetuate colonialism and all of that, that starts from the top and then ends here, where we have to think that we need to invite police officers. If we're not political, why are police officers in our clubs? But
So
anyway,
Ted, is this not the time?
Let me comment about police though. Khadija, we do have at Roseville, the police chief has come to our club a number of times to speak, and I've just noticed lately that the police chief is retiring, and there's a new chief stepping in, happens to be a woman, and it struck me what would be great for us as a club to invite her to come speak and do a program soon.
Why not ask her to be a member?
And police are not political.
Yeah. Right.
Individuals are, but police are not. The other thing about politics that Rotary needs to remember, that we as an organization are apolitical. We don't take sides with politics or political parties. And we're also a-religious, so we're accepting of people from any and all faiths, including those that maybe don't necessarily have a faith. And as long as we remember a couple of those things, I think I think there are a variety of things we can do. I think it'd be great for clubs to have their own little groups of equity inclusion. I'd like to do that with with Roseville, where we can sit down and talk together there about what kind of things can we do, whether it's education or but then also moving beyond that to other sorts of things. You and Lauren and I are in that club. We can start that thing out. We've had some other people on this organization, on these presentations, and we can do that as well. But we've got to take steps where we are, continue to educate ourselves. And I know you were asking earlier, what have you taken out of this? I've learned a lot from a lot of things I've heard. It reinforces things I've wondered about. It makes me think back about some of the history of my own family, 2 or 3, 4 generations before, and what their experiences were in Minnesota in relation to Native Americans for that case. So I'm kind of rambling, but I think a lot of positives come out of this, and we need to keep working and building on it. And we need your firm and strong and direct help and leadership, Khadija. It's very important.
That I agree with you there, because as basically looking at all white faces, we could really very easily slide off the side. We need somebody to poke us once in a while to bring us back to what this is all about. And Khadija does a nice job of that.
Yep, exactly.
Even though she's loud.
I wanted to respond to with Khadija. I can see, again, this me trying to empath, walking into a room full of mostly white males and also seeing police officers. It being not a welcoming environment if Rotary is trying to recruit diverse people. But I also say that some of the reason, when I'm going back to what Ted was saying for the foundations of Rotary, is it's meant to be a community-based organization. And so while we typically think of maybe rich businessmen having started it, it's meant to encompass all employment types within a community. And so there's teachers now, there's marketers, there's lots of people, and including police, because they are part of the community. And so I too struggle with this idea of how, in that environment, how do we have people that may be afraid of police and also police trying to get to know the community they're serving? I don't have an answer, but I hear what you're saying, and I also hear what other people are saying, and that's more that I'll have to personally process. But I also want to reiterate what people are saying, that you have done and been doing a wonderful, amazing job, and I am so appreciative of you, as so many other people have spoken and said that they are. And I do thank you for putting up with all of us.
And this is Kathy, and I know I'm supposed to be in the background, but as a mother and a mother-in-law of police officers and a child of a police officer, I want to speak on behalf of the police officers that they're not all bad. And let me tell you, they're just as nervous walking in a room full of people that they're not sure how they're going to be perceived as everyone else. And it's really helped what Lakeville has done to bring them in so they get to know the community and the community gets to know them. And I need to leave, but I just wanted to let you know. Thank you. And I did order all 3 of these books.
If anybody has a topic interest, let me know. I can recommend a book.
The book.
If you want to know about Black Power, if you want to know about